All right, with that being said, Ms. Lomurro, when you're ready.
Thank you, Judge. May I remove my mask?
You can.
Hi, Dr. Dietz.
Hello.
I'm going to try to stay away from you because I am fighting a bug, as you know. But I tend to get close to them. I'll try and stay away. Scott's family, in this case, is extraordinarily relevant, you would agree with me, right? Because they were there that night, right?
His family is relevant?
Yes, relevant.
Yes, of course.
Okay. And specifically the family members who are still alive are very relevant, right?
They are too, yes.
To this story.
Yes.
Because they were there not only that night, but also these are the people that Scott spent his life with, the 16 years, right?
Yes.
And they saw him at different times in his life and were able to evaluate his mood and the way he reacted to things, which is critical, right?
Perhaps, but they knew him best.
They knew him best. So, of all the work you did in this case, you never spoke with Stephen, right?
I did not personally speak with him. I read his statements and observed him on video.
But you did not speak with him, right?
That's correct.
And we're going on 4 years and 2 months since this incident, right?
Correct.
You did not speak with Michelle, right?
That's right.
And she was in the house and had known Scott all his life as well. You did not speak with Richie.
That's right.
You did not speak with Jonathan.
No.
You did not speak with Adrian, Grandpa.
Correct.
You did not speak with Grandma on the one who came and testified, right?
That's right.
So you've done all this work in this case, but you never spoke to any of the people who knew Scott best, right?
I did not personally speak to them. That's right.
And when I say do all this work in this case, the prosecutor's office was kind enough to get me your invoices, which I have. Do you want a copy or do you want me to just go through it?
I don't need a copy.
Okay. So I have a copy of I have 3 copies of your invoices, but I went through it and I calculated every time I saw, I'm going to get to one so I read it correctly. Every time I saw credit for payment received from Monmouth County, I made sure I put a note in it so I could calculate it correctly. I calculated before this trial started that you'd been paid before you got into trial. I calculated that you'd been paid $178,000. Does that sound right?
How much?
$178,000.
It does not sound right. My office did a calculation before I left saying that for my work on the case, the office billed a total of $120,000.
Let me correct myself. You billed $120,000, and then someone you had working for you on this case billed the additional amount I'm referring to. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that person, so cumulatively, Park Dietz and Associates billed approximately $178,000.
That sounds right.
And out of $178,000 worth of work over 4 years, and before this trial started, about 4 years, you did not speak to a single family member. Is that right? Personally.
That's correct.
What I did notice you did a lot of was flying. 10 hours here and 10 hours back was reflected in your invoice, and that was from May of 2021, right?
There would have been one round trip then, yes.
And that round trip, 10 hours here was $8,000, and that round trip, the trip here was $8,000, and the trip back was $8,000 for a total of $16,000 for time on the airplane, right? Is that correct?
Not exactly, but close enough. It's
Okay.
for the entire travel time.
For the entire travel time. Well, I had you for 4 days, 10 hours a day, so it was really $32,000 for that chunk of time where you came to see Scott the one time, right?
No. Oh, including the 2 days of exam?
Right.
Yes, including everything, I think that's right.
So, to be clear, so we're at $178,000 before you come back here to New Jersey. So I'm not good at math, but that's another 10 hours on the plane and another 10 hours back, and that's going to be another $16,000, right?
I imagine so.
Plus, we had the weekend and all the trial testimony last week and today's testimony. Is it fair to say, Dr. Dietz, that you are going to bill over $200,000 on this file cumulatively?
For the other people as well as myself, for all the preparation,
Right.
all the travel, all of this, the expenses, all of it.
Yes.
Yes,
Over $200,000.
I think that's right.
Public money, as you say, right?
Correct.
Would have been a different rate if it was someone like your last client, Eli Maxwell, right?
Yes.
In this case, I have counted from the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office discovery of about 28,000 pages. Is that correct? Does that sound right?
I couldn't give you a page count.
I think it was, there's a base stamp count, it was approximately that. So will you accept my representation?
Yes.
So 28,000 pages. Mr. Brennan was kind enough to bring one example of a big exhibit. This is only for ID only, Judge. This is State's Exhibit 6 for identification only. This is just a extraction of a cell phone. This is Scott's cell phone. It's about 1,000 pages. So this is one of 28,000 pages that you would have had to review in this case, right?
Yes.
So you have a lot of information to pull from, to choose from. Is that right?
There's a lot of information, only some of it is relevant.
Well, let's talk about this guy. This is your assistant who worked with you on this file, Stephen Carter, right?
I wouldn't call him my assistant, but he's an associate who worked on this file,
An
yes.
associate, it looks to me anyway that he works at TAG now. Does he still work for your other company as well, or just TAG?
Yes.
Or he works for both companies?
Yes.
I get it, he's retired FBI, I get it, that he's got credentials in that area, but what I don't understand necessarily is his qualifications to be dealing with the medicine and the psychology of this case. He has this degree from a university that is, in my research, closed now. Is that right?
I don't know, I thought he had several degrees.
He's got a lot of degrees, don't get me wrong, he's got a lot of degrees. But most of them are for security fraud and things that he dealt with the FBI and then his later career when he was working at Target. He assisted you in the review of, let me get it right, pages 2 through 181 of your report. Is that correct?
That's correct. He did a lot of summarizing of original records, the educational records, and many other records.
But he
But his-
didn't, yeah, he didn't talk to a single family member either, right?
No, he didn't interview people for this case.
No, he looked at other people's information. He looked at other people's records, right?
Just as I did. That's
Just as
right.
you did. You both looked at other people's records, but you didn't talk to those people, right?
That's correct. We didn't go re-interview all the people who had been interviewed and whose interviews were recorded.
Or the
and written out.
people who were giving you the information that you were relying on. For example, just one of them. For example, social worker Stillwell, who had 80 pages of notes and you chose from. You never talked to her, right?
No, I relied on what she wrote and,
Did you talk to her, yes or no?
No.
Okay. And then, for example, Scott's counselor at Hawkswood School, who had similarly 80 entries of notes over 19 pages over 2 years of entries. You took the ones you wanted to, but you never talked to him either, right? Yes or no? Just a yes or no. Did you talk to him?
did I talk to him? No.
So you relied on Mr. Carter and yourself to dig through 28,000 or so pages of documents without speaking to the people who created them originally. Is that correct?
Except for the defendant himself.
We're going to get to, well, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Now's the time to get to it. Scott, in his early life, you will agree with me, the family believed there was something wrong with him. Is that right?
Yes,
And they were under the belief that it was a brain tumor, but it was not a brain tumor, right?
right,
But they believed it to be.
yes,
And so this family reacted to Scott's slow development under false pretenses. Is that correct? Believing that it was a brain tumor that was causing his slowness in development.
yes, but they did recognize there was a problem and treated him differently because of it.
Right. And when he was in 5th grade, that's when the bullying was at its worst, right? Right before he switched to being homeschooled, 5th
Yes,
grade.
correct.
6 years before this incident, right?
Right,
And he had no problems at homeschool and no problems at Hawkswood. All things were fine there, right?
with respect to bullying, yes,
In his 16th year, he starts to have what's categorized throughout the discovery in your report as bad thoughts, right?
I'm not sure if that's his 15th year or his 16th year, but
Why don't we
the final
call
year.
it, why don't we call it 2017?
Good,
Is that fair?
yes,
Okay. So in 2017, he has these bad thoughts, and consistent with mom being protective of Scott and not wanting him to be taken away, that's fair, right? We've learned that.
yes,
Consistent with her not wanting him to get taken away and not wanting him to take any medication, she made sure that no one talked to him. It was a family secret, right? So to speak.
very much so.
All right, let's go to Hawkswood. But before we go to Hawkswood, let me see if I'm forgetting anything. I am. Do you remember doing this video? It was, I guess it was like a podcast type thing, but on TV. Do you remember?
Yeah, I don't know what to call it either.
I don't know what to call it. Do you remember doing it?
Yes,
All right. Do you remember saying this? That's not what I wanted you to say. Hang on one second. All right. Let's see if
So if we want to understand what actually happened, we have to talk to the defendant. We have to talk to other people who were there at the time of the crime. We have to talk to people who know about the defendant's mental state at various times.
Do you remember saying that?
I do.
And is that an accurate statement?
It is. Somebody needs to interview all of those people.
Okay. This thing's got a mind of its own. I'm going to put a blank screen on for a minute while we go over some stuff. At the Hawkswood School, Scott had gone there for he was starting his 3rd year and it's 3.5 years, right? Or 2.5 years.
2.5.
2.5 years. So Scott had been at the Hawkswood School for 2.5 years, which is a school for kids with multiple learning disabilities. Is that right?
Autism spectrum disorder and multiple learning disabilities.
You would agree with me that that's a pretty important place to understand because Scott's there every day, right?
It's an important place to understand his overall progress.
Yes.
It's not important to understand the criminal activity.
We want to understand him, right? We want to know about him.
Want to know his whole life story, and thankfully Hawkswood had records that showed a great deal of it.
They did. They had 1,327 pages that I saw of records, which was a plethora of information for you to go through, right?
Yes,
But you never went to the Hawkswood School, right?
correct.
So you did $200,000 worth of work, but you never went to the Hawkswood School. You never talked to his teachers, right? personally?
I never spoke to the teachers. I've driven by the Hawkswood School,
Did you
but
go
only
inside?
by coincidence.
By
I've not
coincidence?
been inside.
So you haven't walked the hallways though, right?
Haven't walked the hallways, and they would probably not inform my opinion of his mental state on New Year's Eve.
But you said that understanding before, after, during a global life story is important. So that's important, isn't it?
Some things are more important than others.
I get it, but that's part of the puzzle, is Hawkswood. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about it so much, right?
Yes, and if there's something from Hawkswood that challenges my opinions, I look forward to hearing it.
Well, thank you. But my point is that you didn't talk to anybody from Hawkswood.
I interviewed no one other than the defendant. I relied on interviews done by others.
So, the counselor that Scott saw at Hawkswood, oh, I gotta get it out. It's a small table for a lot of documents, give me a second. Okay. The counselor that Scott saw, it was about 19 pages of notes, is that right? I have
That
it
sounds right.
front and back, 19 pages, and I had about 80 entries. And he saw this counselor once a week for the duration of the time he was at Hawkswood. Do you want to try and find it or not?
No,
Okay. So he's seeing this counselor, and the thing that they're focusing on most is cognitive behavioral therapy, right?
the thing they're focusing on most is bullying. The method that they're working toward is cognitive behavior therapy.
You say, that's your opinion, that they were focusing on bullying. I see 80 entries where a lot of it's other things.
There's lots of things, but the 30 entries, 30 uses of the term bullying or bully.
I think you said 20, but I'll accept 30 if that's what you remember.
Yeah, I think it's 30.
But there's plenty of other entries in here that deal with cognitive behavioral therapy, is that right?
Yes, that's the method.
And the one cognitive behavioral therapy that you highlighted was a single entry back in 2016, where Scott was learning the difference between a slow song and a more sped up song, so to speak, that would change the heart rate depending on the song, right?
Yes.
But he also did many other activities that had the same goal, and those included writing stories, right?
Correct.
Keeping a success log, drawing pictures, word association, guided imagery. My favorite, the spaghetti game. Did you see that one?
Yes.
The spaghetti game is a progressive muscle relaxation, tightening, loosening game. And then the day before the note that you referenced about music was running an obstacle course. Do you remember that note?
Yes.
And in running the obstacle course, Scott was able to see what it was like after he had done the obstacle course and his heart was sped up versus the opposite of when you calm yourself down and your heart slows down. Is that right?
Yes.
So it wasn't just music that Scott was learning. There was all these other techniques and all these other things that he incorporated into his life. But you singled out the music, right? Yes or no?
That's true.
The park test on page 29 of your report. Let's go into that for a second. You have your report, right?
Yes.
It's page 29 of your report. The park test. What did he get on that test?
What did he get on it?
What did he get on that test? I can tell you the answer if you want.
Go ahead.
He didn't get anything because he was exempt from grading.
Because what?
He was exempt from grading, and that's his IEP.
He was exempt from grading.
Right. So he took the test. There was no grading of the test. He just took it. Right?
I'll trust you on that, I don't recall.
That's what it says in the IP. We can go through it if you want, but if you accept what I'm saying to you, it was not great.
All right?
You also went through the IEP that demonstrates some strengths that you felt Scott had, right? We did that on direct?
That I don't recall.
Well, you went through the IEP, right?
Went through many of them.
The most recent IEP in 2017, you went through that one in October of 2017.
Did I comment on it in my testimony? Yes.
Yes, you do, because you have at footnote 63, annual review IEP meeting, 10/25/2017. That's at page 29 of your report.
I'm aware of it. Perhaps I've misheard you. I don't know if we're on the same
Wavelength?
topic right now.
It's very possible we're not, but let's get there. Okay, so the 10/25/2017 IEP, do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And in that IEP, there was a discussion about things that were goals or part of daily activities that were evaluated. Do you remember those?
I remember there were such things there.
Like toileting, right? Toileting on your own was one of them, right?
Yes.
And cutting food was one?
Pardon me?
Cutting food was one?
Yes.
Right. And Scott, there was a note that Scott could go do shopping, but he needed someone to help him understand how much money to spend, right?
Yes.
Let's go to outside of school in 2017. Outside of school in 2017, Scott had requested to both his mother and his grandmother that he wanted to get help for the bad thoughts, right?
Yes.
He wanted to go to therapy or be put on medication, right?
Yes.
You remember on direct examination, he took a while talking about this anxiety that he felt Scott was experiencing about the Hawkswood School and the potential of being transferred back to Lomurro School. Remember that, right?
Yes.
Oh, boy. This is 6. This is 1,000. This is 7. This is 5,000 pages. Did you go through all 5,000 pages?
Between Mr. Carter and me, we went through all of it.
Between Mr. Carter and you went through all 5,000 pages and you found a single entry to go over with us on direct examination. And that single entry was, Grandpa says all Scott talks about is killing. Is that right?
Mr. Lomurro, I'm sorry. I apologize, I'm going to let you answer.
Identify it?
Yeah, I don't know what you're saying is 5,000 pages.
I'm going to identify it. It's S7, Judge, for
Okay.
identification, and it's Linda Kologi's extracted cell phone report.
Okay.
I had also referenced S6, which is Scott Kologi's extract as well.
Okay.
So there was this text message that you highlighted. Grandpa says all Scott talks about is killing. That was in it was on October 1st of 2017. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. There was no indication about when Grandpa was referring to Scott. It could have been a general statement, such as Scott. In fact, it actually suggests that Grandpa says Scott all talks about is killing. It could have been over the last year, right?
Correct.
Could have been in a month, 2 months, could have been any time, right?
That's right.
Have you ever played the game Telephone? Have you played
Yes,
it?
I know what you mean.
But you know that game, right? So we have here Grandpa saying something Scott told him, we don't know when, and then Grandpa relaying it to Brittany, and then Brittany relaying it to Mom. That's what we have, right?
I thought it was Stephen.
Stephen, I'm sorry, Stephen. You're right. So we have Scott said something to Grandpa at some unknown date in some unknown context. Then Grandpa says it to Stephen, who's over there, and then Stephen says it to Mom with no context whatsoever. That's what we have, right?
We have what Stephen wrote to Mom.
Right. Then, what we have a couple minutes later, what Stephen wrote to Mom before she even responds is a different text message, and you didn't read that. I'm going to go through it with you, okay?
Sure.
Doctor, if you just give me a second, I have a lot of papers here. Judge, if I have a moment.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, I have screen grabs from these books. I can give you the book to look at, or you can take my word for it. I'll mark this as an exhibit, so that way we have it for the record, Judge. This
Show us
is,
Miss Sibley first.
Miss Sibley, let me give you a copy. I have what was previously marked as S7A. And that was the redacted version that has the 2 text messages. What I am doing is I'm introducing the text message that was sent after that that wasn't. May I approach?
Okay.
Thanks.
We need.
I'm gonna mark this, yeah, I'll mark it first. Where are we up to, D?
Looks like we're going to D17.
D17. Thank you.
Judge, this has already been marked into evidence, and the entirety of the text, both were read by Dr. Dietz.
The one, yeah, the one underneath, there was 2.
Yes. The only thing that isn't there is about the dinner order.
That's where I'm going.
Okay.
I'll give you the exhibit that's been marked by the court, if that's okay, Doctor.
Sure. So that's D17, correct, Mr. Lemire?
Yes, it is, Your Honor.
Okay, D17.
So, on direct examination, you had taken these lengths to say that there was a demonstration that Scott was having this crisis, and you based it in a large part off these text messages. The next text message after he says, Grandpa says all Scott talks about is killing people, then he says he's losing it. What's the next text message just 8 minutes later?
It reads, order pizza and bring it to Grandpa's. Scott said all he had was yogurt and Mary isn't here.
Thank you. So we have this crisis Scott's in, and the next text message that's read, Scott wants yogurt for dinner, right? That's what it says.
Objection, Judge. It doesn't say there's a crisis, and no one testified about a crisis other than Mr. LaFleur.
Yeah, I'm going to sustain the objection to the form of that question. I'll allow you to ask another question. I know what you're trying to ask, but
I'm going to ask another question. Better. So we have this text message about killing people and Scott losing it without any time frame or context to those 2 text messages. And the next text message is, order pizza and bring it to Grandpa's. Scott said all he had was yogurt and Mary isn't here. Is that right?
Yes.
This would be D18. This is a still grab from Scott's cell phone. 18. Thank you. Thank you. Can I approach, Your Honor?
of course.
Thank you. This is a screen grab from Scott's cell phone, and it's a text message on October 7th, 2017, so that would be exactly 1 week later. And just to be clear, because I want to make sure that I have this right, you reviewed all this.
I had access to all this, and either Mr. Carter or I looked at every word of it.
And relied on it for your opinion, in formulating your opinion.
Yes, and everything I thought was relevant made it to my report.
Okay. So this reads oddly from bottom to top. I just want you to tell me if you believe that I'm reading it correctly or not, okay? This is a week later. This is to Scott from a friend of his, we'll say, because I don't know if the name's accurate or not, but it's from a telephone number. That is a very good point, my friend. How's vocational school? Scott's response, I'm not going anymore, but it was really good. Now that's inconsistent with what you said about his experience with vocational school, right?
It's inconsistent with what he said about vocational school.
The next thing that is here is to Scotty, oh, what happened? And from Scott, nothing bad, it just wasn't for me. Then back to Scott, so you sticking with Hawkswood? From Scott, yes. Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you. New Year's Day, 2017. You know what that is, Dr. Dietz?
Rumpled bed with a pair of headphones and something else on it.
That's not an inaccurate description, Dr. Dietz, but more importantly, you know who that is.
I saw photos of all of the beds at the time, but I couldn't tell you which one was which.
So in your $200,000 worth of work you've done on this file, you don't know that this is the bed that Scott slept in with his mother and father. Is that right?
That's right.
Scott woke up in that bed with his mother and father on New Year's morning. You know that, right?
No,
You do not know that.
I do not know that.
That Scott woke up in bed with his mother and father on New Year's Eve?
You said New Year's Day.
New Year's Eve, obviously, that's why.
I actually don't know it about New Year's Eve either, because in none of the statements did Scott say where he slept that night.
Did you watch this trial?
This trial?
Yes.
Not allowed to watch this trial except for Dr. Santina's
So
testimony.
you didn't see that part of the trial, right?
I was not permitted to see anything of the trial except Dr. Santina's testimony.
Let's talk about Scott's outfit choice that day. Did you know that his Aunt Michelle said he'd been wearing that jacket all day long? Did you know that?
No.
Okay. Did you know that his Uncle Richie, and both of these people were at the house all day with him, did you know that he said that Scott had that jacket on all day long that day?
No. So they're contradicting what Scott reported to everyone.
Did you know that Scott had a history of wearing outfits like the one he wore on New Year's that was from his Halloween outfit that year? Did you know that he had a history of wearing those outfits on New Year's Eve? Did you know that?
I had heard that, but I don't know where.
Have you ever seen this picture?
No.
This is a picture of Scott being one of the Blues Brothers on New Year's Eve. You've never seen this picture?
No, it's good.
It is.
Hold on for a second. Do we know the number, just so that the record is clear? I'm gonna try to find it.
Judge, I would have introduced this in Steven's PowerPoint or Jonathan's PowerPoint, I believe.
All right.
I
hold on.
apologize, I don't have the slide number.
That's okay. I'll help you.
Thank you.
The picture of the bed before was D dash 4.2. The picture that we're looking at now is D 4.5. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. You're welcome. Going back to the bed, Scott has said historically that he, especially with you in your interview, he said that he didn't sleep there every night, right?
He said he didn't sleep there every night. With me, he estimated once a month.
Right, so it's very clear that he was embarrassed about it because he downplayed how many times he slept there, right?
That's how I interpret it.
And that's consistent with how he described it to the police when Stephen corrected and said you sleep in that bed.
Yes,
And he's a 16-year-old boy who's maybe insecure about that fact, right?
sure.
So let's fast forward on New Year's Eve to 7:30 p.m. 7:30 p.m. is when you have that cartoon theme song search, right?
I couldn't understand you.
I'll walk over him, sorry. At 7:30, that's when we have these searches on Scott's cell phone, right?
Yes,
And one of them is the cartoon song that we all listen to, right?
the anime, yes.
The anime. The anime song, there's no indication if Scott listened to that song for 1 second or 2 seconds or 2 minutes, is that right? We don't know.
That's true.
So at 7:30, you credit this song for being something that he would use to pump himself up, right? You assume that?
I assume that he listened to it and that the effect of that would be to pump him up.
But you don't know that. You don't know that he listened to the whole thing, right?
That's true.
Right. And there's this gap of time after that that's not in your report from 7:30 till 11:30. That's 4 hours, right?
Yes.
Did you play sports growing up?
Couldn't hear
Did you
you.
play sports growing up?
Not much.
Not much.
Not very well.
Do you watch sports at all?
No.
All right, this is a bad question for you then, Dr. Dietz. What I was trying to get at is many times before an athletic competition, people run out of the tunnel with music blasting to get their adrenaline going. You would agree with that, right?
Yes,
And that's because the competition is imminent, right?
yes.
They're not listening to it 4 hours earlier to go take a nap, right?
And that I don't know, but I would assume not.
It would be unlikely, I think, right? So Scott listens to this at 7:30. Do you know what he did after that for those 4 hours?
Only by trying to piece together various statements, because he does not say much about it. But I think he went downstairs and spent some time with the family.
Right, spent some time with the family. There's an indication, I'll tell you, that during this trial, there's an indication that he had eaten some chicken, which is consistent with what Scott likes, right?
Yes,
And that the family had gathered together to watch King Kong. Is that
that's
right?
my understanding, yes.
Scott says that he went upstairs. Well, first he says that he talked to his mom about this school project, the floral arrangements, right?
Yes,
And then mom said, you know what, why don't you present to us after the ball drops? And that's when he makes his decision to go practice for the floral presentation, right?
so it seems.
So it seems, but he brought his backpack up there with him, right?
Yes,
And inside of his backpack, this is a picture of the backpack. And Judge, we had previously.
Looks like S2, slide 88.
Thank you, Judge. And the next one is S2, slide 96. Inside of the backpack, here's the contents of the backpack. It's a folder, a school folder for Scott, right?
yes,
With some pencils. Consistent with him working on his school project, is that right?
yes.
Now, consistent with your pumped up theme that you had described pretty thoroughly on direct, Scott, after he arms himself, he doesn't burst out the door and run downstairs and start shooting people, right?
No, he lies in wait.
He lies in wait as you describe it, or hides. You don't know what it is, right? You don't know what it is. He sits in the corner.
Well, I think it's both those things, lying in wait and hiding.
But he doesn't run to anyone to go shoot them or do this aggressive, adrenaline-filled attack, right?
He does not, but he described the effects of adrenaline.
After the fact. After the fact.
Well, the only time he describes that incident, of course, is after the fact.
But after the fact is inconsistent with what's occurring during the act. Because we know he didn't run, we know he wasn't out of breath, we know he wasn't anxious, and we know that because it's described by Officer Richards, which is documented in your report, right?
No, that's not right.
Let's look at it together.
It's, no, I think that's a misrepresentation.
Well, we're gonna look at it together and figure it out. No one describes him as running, right? No one.
No, of course not.
Okay, nobody describes him as doing army rolls or screaming, nobody, right?
No, he didn't do any of those things.
Right, he
We-
walked.
I think we,
No, doctor, I'm asking yes or no questions. He walked, right?
he walked.
Yes. And Rafaela and Stephen both described him as saying nothing and having a blank look, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go to page 38 of your report. And you say that the best evidence is before, during, and after, because Scott hasn't had a chance to recall anything at that point, it's just occurring in the real moment, right?
I don't understand what you're asking.
You would agree with me that what is being observed at the moment is the most accurate, as opposed to saying what you think later on. I'll strike the
Whose
question.
reliability are we judging?
Well, we're going to judge the officer who made the arrest. So are you with me on page 38?
I am.
Okay. We're going to go down to the second paragraph under arrest and defendant where it says, the last line, you see, he spoke. Are you with me? To both footnote 93.
Oh, okay.
You with me?
Yes.
He spoke in a calm, quiet manner and did not appear to be out of breath or anxious. Is that correct? Did I read that rightly?
Yes, that's after the arrest.
But this is seconds later, or minutes later, right? He's not out of breath, he's not, he's calm and quiet according to this. Quiet manner, not anxious or out of breath. Is that right?
That's right, however long after the last shot it was, that's right.
And everyone who was there during the shooting is consistent with that. Nobody says he was out of breath, or that he was anxious, or that he was screaming. None of that, right?
The only person who says that is the defendant in describing how he was as he loaded the gun and waited.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to what Scott said when he was being interrogated by police officers. We're going to get to that, okay? Let's go to page 39, the next page. This is the second paragraph. You see as the defendant?
Yes.
Okay. As the defendant was escorted down the stairs of his residence, he stepped over a body, but his expression did not change and he did not cry. As he was placed in a patrol car, he said in a clear, low, calm voice, "I just don't know why." Is that right?
Yes.
Recording in progress.
In that moment, we're going back to the actual shooting. In that moment, Scott shoots his mother, who is the person that he relies on most in his life. Is that right?
Yes.
And he is not changed in his persona whatsoever. Is that right? He doesn't cry, he doesn't fall to the ground, nothing.
Are we talking about the moment of the
The
shooting?
moment of the shooting. The no indication that he had any reaction whatsoever. Right?
We have no data on that, but I have no reason to think there was any reaction whatsoever.
But we do know that this is the person who gets him dressed in the morning, right?
This is the mother who's cared for him his whole life.
So it would be unfair to say that Scott loved anyone more than his mother, right? He loved his mother.
He loved his mother. I don't know whether he loved Grandpa more or anyone else more, but he loved his mother.
So after the shooting, when he either snaps out of it or sees Grandpa, or for whatever reason that this shooting stops, he does not beeline out the front or back door despite them being right there, right?
Correct.
He could have gone and got away and ran down the street or done whatever he wanted to do if in fact he had a desire to do that, and he doesn't, right? You asked him about it.
I don't think he could have gotten too far away, but yes, he could have run out of the house.
He could have ran. And that would have been something that you consider as proof of someone understanding wrongdoing is running and hiding, right? You've done that in cases in the past.
That's one way some people who know it's wrong behave.
Right. Or in the Dietz case where she called 911, you said that was a reason that you could say somebody knew that they had done something wrong because they called the police, right? Scott doesn't call anyone, doesn't call for help, says nothing, right?
Sits down and waits for the police.
Sits down. He didn't go on some bizarre rant like Bardo did, who had just killed the person he was, I guess, obsessed with, right?
I don't remember what he did afterwards, but
I think he ran in traffic and said, "I shot Elizabeth," whatever. Did that sound right?
Maybe, but Scott did not do that.
He didn't do anything abnormal with some burst of emotion indicating that he was terribly overcome by what had just happened, right? What he does is he goes upstairs and places the gun on the ground and takes his jacket off and sits next to his dog, right?
Yes. Well, I think he sat and then the dog came to him.
That's very possible. I have gone through your report. Would you agree with me that the following doctors documented a history of hallucinations? Whether or not you agree with them is a different question. I'm just asking if you noted that, if they noted the history and you put it in your report, okay? Dr. Greenfield, right?
Yes.
Dr. Lomurro, right?
Yes.
Dr. Wilder Willis, right?
Yes.
Dr. Russian, right?
Yes.
Dr. Perrin,
Yes.
and Dr. Santino.
Yes.
And in Grandpa's statement that was taken just hours later after this incident, he didn't have time to talk with Scott about anything, obviously, right?
Right.
They were in different places of the police department, and Grandpa gave a statement, right?
Yes.
And in Grandpa's statement, he described Scott telling him about hallucinations. Is that right?
Yes. Scott told all of these people and me about what Scott calls hallucinations.
But it was at that time, on January 1st, that Grandpa said, not later, at evaluations a year later or whatever else, it was on that day, that exact day, that Grandpa described hallucinations that Scott had told him, including one that appeared to be turning into the devil, right?
Yes. That interview is the
Yes or
only.
no, doctor? It's a yes or no question. Sorry.
Now I forget what the question was.
I think you answered it, don't worry. Let's talk about this voices in the shower thing. Well, first let's talk about Scott. Let's talk about Scott. He's 16 years old in this picture, right? This is the police interrogation 2 hours after, right?
The interview, yes.
16 years old.
Correct.
Right? And he has a history of being gullible, right? You noted in your report.
Yes, it's true.
He has a history of being suggestible, right?
Yes.
He's a 16-year-old boy who spends his nights in bed with mom and dad, right? Despite being a junior in high school, right?
At least some of his nights, yes.
And you have diagnosed yourself as being autistic, and he's 16 years old, is that right?
Yes.
So this 16-year-old boy is in a police department with a detective from the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office, and whose leading questions are being asked of him. You would agree with that, right?
Sometimes.
And leading questions, you said, can be toxic because they can distort evidence, right?
They can.
So one thing that happened in this video I'm going to play right now, you had been critical about Scott saying that he never heard a voice in the shower that day. I'm just going to play this. This is, I can mark it as a new exhibit or just give you timestamps.
It's S76 in evidence, so this entire thing is in evidence. You can just
I'm
mark
just
the
going to play
time.
if that's okay.
That's fine. Just mark the time.
The marking of the time is 3:02:06 a.m. And
Were you hearing any voices or seeing any things tonight when this happened?
No,
You had the gun?
no.
No? So there was no, you had no voices
Well, I think earlier,
while it was going on?
so Scott is appearing to say, I think earlier, and rubbing his head and thinking, and Detective Kazi cuts him off and brings him back to a different moment. Is that right? That's what we saw right there, right?
But I thought he was starting to say C, that I think earlier I saw.
Well, we can listen to it again if you want. Remember, we're talking about a 16-year-old gullible autistic boy, right?
Yes.
That's what we're talking about here, right? So, descriptions that Scott gives to police and to other people in his life may not be as clear as we would want them to be. Is that right? Is that fair?
I think that's often true. Were you going to play it again?
No, we're gonna move on. I think nobody wants to watch me go close to anything. Let's talk about dissociation. Actually, you know what, first? Yeah, so let's talk about dissociation. So you diagnosed Scott as having gone through a dissociative episode, right?
I don't know if it's actually a diagnosis, but I would describe him as having been through at least one dissociative episode during the time of the crime.
And you will agree with me that dissociation can affect one's memory, right? You would agree with that?
Yes.
In fact, it was a focus point of yours in the Ghislaine Maxwell case, right? Dissociation was one of the points that you focused on?
I don't think so.
Well, we can go through it. Oh, boy. Can I mark this? I guess we're up to 18 or 19?
We are going up to 19.
Thank you. Thank you so much. May I approach the witness, Judge?
You can.
Thank you. Doctor, this is a summary of your opinion that was produced for the court's review. I'll draw your attention if you'll take a... Do you agree that you were a part of this case and that this is a document you're familiar with?
Yes. I know what you're talking about now.
Okay, so one of the... You were profiling Jeffrey Epstein in that case, is what you said, right?
That's what I was originally retained to do. And then this morphs into different topics.
Gets into a lot of different places.
Yes.
One of the places that it gets into involves dissociation, right?
Yes.
And this was with regard to, and I'll quote, this is page 8 of 15, are you with me?
On page 8.
On page 8 of 15, I'm just going to get us to where dissociation becomes relevant.
Yeah, this
Page,
is,
I'm sorry, page 7, under November, page 8 of the printed reference point. It's D,
Yes.
subpoint D. Are you with me?
right, this is from Engel and Donahue's writings about the various kinds of false allegations.
Right, so let's talk about what it says. This is part of what you were being offered to talk about, which is opinions related to the multiple pathways to false sex assault allegations, right?
Yes,
And then there's a discussion about the many different ways that pathways to solve false sex assault allegations, including lying, implied consent, false memories, intoxication, antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, delirium, psychotic disorders, and J, which is the relevant part for our discussion, is dissociation, right?
yes.
Okay. So let's fast forward to that point of dissociation. And there's a sub-point describing what dissociation is. If it's okay with you, I'd like to read it through together. Is that okay?
Objection, I don't know what we're reading aloud in front of the jury who offered this, whether or not Dr. Dietz has seen it before and can verify it. I don't
I
know
can lay
any
a
of that
foundation, Judge.
information.
I don't have the document, so I
I
don't
can
even know
give you
what we're
the
talking
sorry.
about.
May I approach?
You sure can. Just give me a second to read it. What's the area that you're looking at? What page?
Page 10 there, see?
Page 10?
And then the first category, dissociation.
All right, hold on. Doctor, paragraph 10, dissociation, is this your opinion or is this you taking it from some other source?
This is taken from another source. It is nearly verbatim from a source referenced on page 8, which says that the following material is taken nearly verbatim from that source.
Is that what you were talking about just earlier from the two names? that you
Yes,
said?
from the Engel and O'Donoghue article.
Judge, I mean,
Can I Yeah, can I just see a sidebar
Yeah,
real
sure,
fast?
sure.
Just because I want to make sure before we ask the question.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm sorry, Judge.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Rather than go through the whole definition, or whatever this is, description, do you agree with the general concept that's contained within this, and did you rely on it, that type of description in other cases you've worked on?
I do agree with the portion of this description that says that dissociation can affect memory.
That's the part I want to ask. That's all I want to ask you about.
That's the only part I agree with.
The rest of it, throw it out the window. And I'll
Good.
take that back from you if you don't mind. Thanks. So it's fair to say that this dissociation can have a impact on memory.
It can, yes.
I think I'm almost done, Doctor. Hang on one second. Oh, boy. The total amount of video with Scott, you only saw Scott one time over 2 days, right?
One
We'll call it 2
2-day
times.
exam. Yes.
2 times, 2 consecutive days, right?
That's right.
And you recorded it, and my total is that it equals 6 hours and 50 minutes, is that correct? Would that be right?
6 hours and 50 minutes total for both days?
Yeah.
That sounds
That's,
short.
that's clearly not right.
Right?
2, 4, 6, 12 hours and 50 minutes.
That sounds right.
That sounds right. So we have 12 hours and 50 minutes worth of footage, is that right?
Yes.
Nice to meet you, Doctor. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Judge, can I have a moment to clean my mess up?
Sure can.